So that's a summary of what bioregional cosmolocalism can look like. There are various consequences and further developments it's worth going into. One of these is a very good opportunity given to us by the dynamic of self-sufficiency created by regional circularity. This opportunity is global inclusivity. The model of regionally circular and cosmolocally connected factories can be applied worldwide, potentially eliminating much of global poverty. Even in an area that is currently extremely poor, once a factory is built and the initial raw materials are supplied, few extra inputs of capital are needed. So long as the local people are taught how to run the system and given access to the network, the area can quickly become self-sufficient in the items produced in the factory and catch up to the level of development embodied in the globally shared knowledge database. Poor regions have different needs to those in the so-called global north, but such variety is incorporated into this model. Each area can adapt the equipment and its use to their own situation. They can also share their experiences with others in similar situations, so as to collectively discover the best ways forward. Another related consequence is that bioregional cosmolocalism gives societies and cultures the freedom to choose their own way of life. The spread of capitalism has resulted in a lot of cultural homogenization. A major reason for this is that, in the capitalist model, to access modern goods, people have to subscribe to a particular way of life, which is to say working in a full-time, specialized job to earn the money with which to buy things. In a cosmolocal system, this is no longer a necessity. The network charters will mandate some things, such as sharing knowledge, becoming regionally circular and so on, but they do not force a local area to organize its workforce in a particular way. In a fully developed cosmolocal system, if the people of a bioregion want a particular technology, they must connect to the relevant network, build a manufacturing facility, and obtain the requisite materials. But they can choose how to organize the work itself. One way of organizing work is for every young adult to spend a couple of years working full-time in factories so that the whole population is provided with a basic level of material goods. Another is to have an individualistic ethos, more like the West has today. Yet another way of doing it is to use tokens instead of money, so that to access particular types of product, you need to contribute to the relevant network in order to earn the relevant tokens. There are a multitude of possibilities, and between them they can enable a multitude of ways of life, which in turn might become the basis for many different cultures. A more prosaic consequence has to do with the direction of material development. In today's capitalist economy, the dominant model is of massive, centralized factories producing enormous amounts of just a few items. In contrast, in the cosmolocal model of circular factories serving a local area, individual factories would aim to provide a wide range of products to a relatively small number of people. So they will prefer smaller and more versatile equipment that can be used to produce whatever items their local communities want. This approach of having versatile factories that produce many items enables something called economies of scope, which are the savings in cost, energy and work that occur because many items can be produced with the same equipment or materials. This compares to economies of scale, which are more common in the current capitalist system, in which savings occur due to producing large amounts of the same thing. A common concern about cosmolocalism's local-scale manufacturing is that it would make things more expensive due to the lack of economies of scale. But in any manufacturing system, there can be a combination of economies of scale and economies of scope. In cosmolocal manufacturing, economies of scope become more dominant. Looking at the underlying cost basis, the fact that the materials and products cycle around the bioregions decreases the need for raw materials and transportation, and the fact that each bioregion need only produce that which it needs, and produces for itself rather than relying on distant labour, both stops wasteful overproduction and ensures some regions aren't exploited by others. In today's world, people in the developing world are paid far less for a day's work than those in the West. This means things are cheaper than they otherwise would be in the West, but in order to do so, it both exploits and embeds global inequality. Bioregional cosmolocalism, with an ethos of global inclusivity, uproots this exploitational dynamic and so allows us to overcome the current global inequality. The development of versatile factories also greatly increases societal resilience, as each bioregion can produce what it needs with minimal reliance on global supply chains. To develop a truly resilient system of bioregional cosmolocalism, the ideal would be to ensure that each bioregion can manufacture not just the products they want, but the machinery they need to make those products too. This isn't just a pipe dream. The Centre for Bits and Atoms has already built super fab labs, which contain the machinery needed to produce fab labs themselves. So far, 2 super fab labs have been built, one in Kerala and one in Bhutan. A more difficult development is to ensure each bioregion can build the infrastructure underlying cosmolocalism itself. Cosmolocalism relies on the internet for global communications, servers to store the information in the cloud, and computers to access it. Currently, all of this technology relies on complex global supply chains and ultimately the capitalist economic system. To create a self-sustaining cosmolocal system, this technology will need to be produced within the cosmolocal system itself. It's a lot of complicated technology for individual bioregions to produce, but it's possible to design cosmolocal networks of research and development labs, and there's no reason to suppose we can't produce all this technology locally if we focus on understanding how to do so. Another sticky issue is that of capital and ownership. Capital and ownership are, of course, absolutely fundamental to the current system of global capitalism. They will also be important in bioregional cosmolocalism, but we will need to have a different relationship to them and understanding of them. There's a lot of depth to this issue, but for now I will just describe the differing relations to it in capitalism and cosmolocalism. In capitalism, and in brief summary, capital is seen as being owned by individuals and organisations, with ownership conferring upon the owners almost total power over that which they own, with that power generally only being limited by the laws of the land. It is accepted and assumed that capitalists will use their capital in their own self-interest, which is taken to be taking profits to spend on themselves and investing to increase how much capital they personally own. Of course, there are a multitude of nuances, but that's the basic story. This understanding of capital and ownership is incompatible with bioregional cosmolocalism. I will illustrate this with an example. In the current system, when a capital owner invests in building a factory in a poor area, they own the factory and use it to maximize their personal profits. To do this, they sell the products into the global economic system. Other people who have money buy the products, while the people who work in the factories and the communities around them only benefit through their wages. But for a bioregionally circular cosmolocal factory, the products need to circulate in the local area. If such a factory is controlled by a profit-maximizing capitalist, they will extract as much money as they can out of the community, keeping it poor and doing things that increase their profits but are not in the best interests of the bioregion. Instead of this, it's important that cosmolocal factories are run in alignment with the interests of various groups, particularly the local community, but also the cosmolocal networks they belong to, the environment both locally and globally, and humanity as a whole. To make this possible, it's important to recognize that the concept of ownership of capital actually contains various constituent parts, and these can be separated. These constituent parts include decisions about how capital is deployed, in whose interests decisions within an organization that constitutes a capital asset are made, how the monetary value of the capital should change over time, who should receive payments or provisions due to the productivity of the capital assets, and what kind of payments or provisions they should receive, and so on. Ultimately, to create a functional system of bioregional cosmolocalism, we will need power over capital to be restructured so that all these questions can be answered in ways that contribute to the holistic well-being of humanity and the rest of life. There are already ownership and governance structures that do this, such as the Future Guardian model I describe in my book and will mention in a later video. There is also the fairly new field of regenerative finance, which is working out how to use new tools such as blockchain and decentralized autonomous organizations to solve these kinds of issues. Another issue that's related to capital and ownership is that of incentives. In the current system, money is the great incentive. It's generally understood that people work hard to create and spread innovations so they can get rich. In bioregional cosmolocalism, this incentive is much smaller because innovations are shared freely and used in the interests of individual bioregions. So instead of personal financial gain, the main incentive for creating and spreading innovations becomes improving your local area. People who want to improve something in their area work out how to do it and implement it locally. Then they share their innovation cosmolocally, and people in other areas can choose to apply it in their own area. The innovation process itself can also involve collaboration between bioregions. Some people think that without the incentive of getting personally rich, there will be much less innovation, but neither evidence nor reason back this up. Even in the current system, in which the financial incentive is encouraged, many people, such as university scientists, forward human knowledge for reasons other than money. There are also many people who work hard on behalf of their local communities. And although this is a personal opinion, my impression is that most people basically want to be content and successful within the norms of society. Those norms are currently to become rich, but people would be equally motivated in a world where the accepted version of success is improving your local area and so the lives of you, your family and friends, and your community. On top of this, within bioregional cosmolocalism, there can be a great variety of personal incentives, including a degree of wealth, and clearly recognised and celebrated prestige. There's one final thing to note in relation to a developed system of bioregional cosmolocalism, which is that it would be the dominant system, but not totally and exclusively so. There would still be global trade. There might be some areas with more people than the land can feed, so other areas would supply some of their food. Some areas would specialise in particular things. This would include technical products such as satellites, and it might be best to produce the technology underlying the internet in specialised regions rather than in a wholly decentralised way. It may also include pursuits such as specific types of art and things related to the ecology or geography of individual bioregions. And people would still travel, both to move to other areas and to see the world. But all of these things would happen in much more balanced proportion than they do today. Every bioregion would be fairly self-sufficient, so global trade would be greatly decreased. And rather than living in ways that mean they want or need to fly across the world for a short holiday or a business trip, as many do now, people will have lifestyles that give them contentment and fulfillment in their home bioregion, while being able to engage in slow travel if they want to.